Lyle Vance, Jeff Reese, Roger Friedel, Paul Holmring, Brett Road, Lindsay Nessen, Kurt Fertig, Paul Fulsham, Chris Breinholt. Who else? Have I missed somebody?
Yeah, I think
Dustin.
Denver Reese.
Huh?
Denver Reese is here.
Denver Reese?
Yeah.
Is that Denver Reese? Hi, Denver Reese. We're glad to have you with us this evening. And nobody, once again, has come up with a plan to pray and say the pledge, so me being the mayor, I can ask somebody to do it. And Chris Breinholt will offer the pledge for us, after which Chief Bertig, what?
Reinhold's going to do the prayer.
What did I say?
Pledge. You're good.
Well, he can do the one he wants.
Okay, go ahead and bid.
Chris will offer the prayer, and Kurt Fertig will lead us in the pledge.
Sure you want me to do the prayer?
That's good.
Our Father in heaven, we are thankful to be here tonight at this council meeting. We ask that we might be guided and directed by Thee, that decisions made here tonight will be in the best interest of the citizens of Tremonton and the best interest of the city. We're grateful for this great nation, and we're grateful for the freedoms that we have to govern ourselves. We ask that that would help each one of us live and conduct ourselves in a way that would preserve those freedoms for those who follow. Ask for these things and say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have guests from Utah State with us. We appreciate you. What was your name?
Dan Black.
Dan Black. Dan Black. From Utah State, we appreciate you being with us, and the rest of you, we appreciate you all coming and showing your interest in what goes on in Tremonton City. Council, we have an agenda tonight. Any questions on it?
I'll make a motion we approve the agenda as written.
Motion made by Lyle.
I'll second.
Second by Jeffrey. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public comment time. This is time for the public to address the council regarding any of your concerns. This is your time. Pardon?
Minutes.
Oh, where'd I do it?
Yeah, we got to approve the
Forget
minutes.
it. I'm going home. How about if we approve the minutes from December 4th, Jeffrey?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes of December 4th, 2018.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Jeff, seconded by Lyle Vance. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Public comment time. This is the time for the public to address the council with any concerns. Anybody like to address the council this evening? Paul?
I would. Paul Fulgham. I am a citizen of Tremont. I've been here, lived in town for almost 27 years. And I know you guys are making some big decisions tonight. And I just want to, my concerns is, don't want to see any more empty, vacant buildings on Main Street where businesses have to leave. I know the dealership here, I've probably in the 30 years I've been in the area, 32 years, I've probably bought 8 different vehicles from one of the GM dealers over on that area. And it's not a lot of tax dollars, but time we have a vacant business or we lose sales in town, that hurts us economically. And I just want you to know, my feelings is that we should try to keep all the business we can get in town to help us as citizens keep our tax dollars down and to be able to provide the amenities that we are used to here. And that's my comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm Randall Payne. I just want to renew my feeling that we're moving too fast on the proposal that we'll be discussing tonight. It's impossible for me to prove material harm, which is the standard that I have to meet to object to the motion on the table until there's some sort of plan in place for the expansion of the dealership. I don't want anybody to think I'm against that, I'm not. I just want to make sure that potential damage to me is mitigated. I don't think there's any question that it's going to affect my property value, the property values of D. Madsen, Jeff Skinner. We're going to be affected, but it's hard for us to tell how we're going to be affected until there's some sort of plan on the table. Thanks.
Anyone else? Thank you for your comments. Introduction of Dan Black, our new executive for Utah State University in Brigham City. We'll give you a few minutes.
My name's Dan Black, and I would prefer you'd say Utah State in Tremonton, if you would.
Oh, so you're not in Brigham City?
I am. So I represent what's called the Brigham City region, which has buildings in Tremonton, the 2 in Brigham City and 1 in Kaysville. And so I'm out here tonight to introduce myself and to try and build some relationships with the city and try and increase our presence here in Tremonton. We have about 45 students that are attending USU in Tremonton right now, and we'd like to see that number go up a little bit over the next few years. As the new director here, one of the things that I'd like to focus on is giving back to our communities and partnering with the communities to try and, well, our ultimate goal is to increase the number of those that are educated, because deep in our hearts we feel like the more education a person has, wherever they get it, benefits their lives in a lot of ways. And so I just wanted to make that introduction and tell you a couple of things that we're doing to try and engage the community. Last fall, we started a series of community ed classes out here. We taught an essential oils class and a photography class. And we've started a lecture series, and that's broadcast to the building out here. This spring, the lecture series is in conjunction with the Golden Spike celebration. So each month, starting January 10th, we will have a lecture that's related to the development of the railroad, the building of the railroad, and then culminating a couple of days before the Golden Spike celebration. We're one of the Spike 150 events for the state, and we're hoping that that present will generate some excitement and also tie Utah State with something that's neat in the county. So,
On that, well, that'll be a teleconferencing kind of thing, won't it?
it will.
Where will
yes.
the
So
speaker
the
be?
speakers will be in Brigham City, but it will be broadcast statewide. Our building here in Tremonton will be one of the reception sites, and it'll be open. They're free to the public. And you'll start seeing flyers around town and in the newspaper trying to advertise that as we get a little closer. Just for information's sake, you might not know that right here in Tremonton you can earn 4 different associate degrees, 24 different bachelor's degrees, 23 different master's degrees, and 1 doctorate degree. Right here in Tremonton, down at our building. Most of that is broadcast in, and you're in a class with students all over the state. In order to make our regional campus system work, what we do is we get a couple of students in Tremonton, and 1 in Brigham City, and 2 in Tooele, and 3 in Blanding, and pretty soon we have a class. And it makes the system work, it makes it economical, and it allows us to provide these opportunities in places like Tremonton. So,
I have one more question.
You bet.
I'm sorry. When you have your classes up here, there's complete interaction between the students that are up here and the teachers. They can talk back and forth, answer questions.
Yep.
Isn't that correct?
That's correct. So it's a live conversation. We also encourage our teachers to get out to the sites as much as they can. So, for instance, if we had 3 or 4 students here one night, the teacher could come here and broadcast from Tremonton to the rest of the state. It's a pretty neat system. So anyhow, I just wanted to make that introduction. I do have a handout or a flyer that lists all those degrees. Could I leave that with each of the members of the board, and then maybe I'll leave some sitting here, and if those are interested, take them, and if not, if you just want to hand them out or send them by the city, we appreciate it. So, any other questions that I might could answer? Final note is, as we move forward and the city has events and things going on, we'd love to partner and be a part of that and have Utah State become kind of a commonplace in the area. Over the next while, we'll do a target to many of the businesses in town and try and get some Utah State window clings out in the window and try and kind of build the image and let people know that these opportunities are available here. So thank you very much.
Council, do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Discussion and consideration of approving the November financial statements. Any questions on the financial statements?
I'll make a motion that we approve the financial statements for November.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Lyle Z, second by Lyle H. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion and consideration of approving the November warrant register. Questions on that, council?
I'll make a motion, we approve the November warrant register.
Motion made by Jeffrey,
I second.
second by Brett. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion and consideration of adopting ordinance 18-19, vacating the public street of 650 West between 100 South and Main Street and accepting real property for a new public street aligned with the existing 600 West between 100 South and Main Street. Council, any questions on this?
I drive bus and I go through that neighborhood, and I also go every day up past Stokes Trucking, and I am so impressed with the way that they have made that I don't think it's devalued their property at all up there. I feel like they've done such a great job of bringing their community and them together that and I know that Crump Reese would do the same thing. I think with their fencing and all the curb and gutter and everything to go in there, I think it's going to really help that area out versus hurt it. And I've talked to quite a few people. I know quite a few people in that area, and the majority of them aren't against it. Most of them are pretty neutral and think it's a good idea.
Any other comments, discussion?
There's been a lot of hours put into this the last couple of weeks, and even before that, lots of meetings and that type of stuff, and you know, taking into consideration everybody here and we've talked to and that type of stuff, I would like to make the motion to adopt ordinance number 18-19, moving that public road and hope that we can keep Crump and Reese here in town.
I'll second that
We
motion.
have a motion by Lyle Vance, second by Lyle Holmgren. Roll call.
Brett, aye.
Lyle H. Aye.
Jeff, abstain.
Lyle Vance, aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Discussion and consideration of awarding the BR Mountain Road project, road to be constructed at the approximate intersection of 300 North and
2300
2300 West.
Is the actual intersection address. And as you know, that's the start of our 80-foot road corridor. It's going to be a main collector road someday for taking people off the hillside and out of that subdivision down to Main Street to alleviate the pressure that we put in the neighborhood. And so we bid out the first section by contract. We had to with the landowner that we purchased the easement from back 3 years ago. And it'll be roughly 1,300 feet of road will be built in an 80-foot wide roadway cross section. And we had unprecedented number of bidders. We had 13 bidders bid, and the bids range from the low bid, $552,000, to the high bid of $832,754.50. our recommendation is award the bid to Staker Parsons, who was the apparent low bidder. And they've done work for us in the past for $512 and $252, which is actually a little below what our engineer estimate was. We was kind of happy to see that. So, and if you look there in your attachments are all the bidders and all the bid items that was bid and in the sequence there of the bids.
So the sewer line and the sewer line especially, the sewer line and all of the other trenching, all of that will have granular backfill.
Absolutely, that's our spec.
I keep bringing this up because I've heard.
Well, I know, I heard a contractor too said that they didn't bid it. I don't have a way to know. All I look at is the prices, and the prices come in. If you look at all the bidders, their prices per foot of pipe goes up and down. And it depends on.
Yeah, and I understand that, but specifically,
Yeah.
we're gonna watch that, is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely, it's in our spec.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in this thing, they price their price per foot with the pipe in place and all the backfill material in there
Okay. All right.
per our spec. So,
All right.
and I had the same contractor voice concerns, but if you look through the bid item for that pipe, you'll see it all the way down through there. That bid for that line item for the pipe is not that much different from our engineer estimate, and it's not that much different from some of the other bidders that bid it. And I guess it's just their speculation on how much they can get their gravel for or what they want to pay their labor to lay the pipe.
All right.
So,
Well, that was my only question because it
And-
got brought to me, so.
and Stakers will have, and we haven't had the pre-construction meeting yet, so know who their subs are officially,
Okay.
but they have subs that do that kind of work for them.
Okay.
So,
Well, do you have anything else?
no, that's it, unless you had any questions.
I'll make a motion that we award the bid for the BR Road project to Staker Parsons for $512,252.
I'll second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, discussion and consideration of awarding the 2300 West water line extension. This is water line to be constructed along the western end property lines. Paul?
And once again, this is one, we had unprecedented number of bidders. We had 11 bidders on this project, which tells me that they're hungry and wanting to get work lined up, so we're bidding them at the right time of the year. The bids range from a high bid of $123,996 to a low bid of $51,859.50. And the apparent low bidder is Grover Excavation from right here in town. And Grover's done lots of work for us in the past. Looking at the prices, the engineer estimate was actually $81,587, and Clayton bid it, and he's just what he's willing to take home to stay in town to work. So our recommendation is award it to Clayton. And if you know, this won't put the pipe under the freeway, it takes it up from Main Street to the freeway. Our next job, you know, especially if we get interest in people developing on the other side on that property that's already annexed in the city, is to get a line pushed under the casing pushed and a pipe under the freeway.
So with the drain, then, you know, we had that problem with the flooding the way we did. That's where part of the water's gonna go.
That's where part of the water goes. The other part goes a little bit further east of there. Is the main road drain is actually east of there. That one there, the old mill ditch drain. The one east of there actually comes back around on the other side of the freeway there on that frontage road, and they come back together. So that's just one of the drainage areas that takes in some of the water out of that.
So in this right of way, we've got the drainage, we've got the sewer, and we got water all getting put out.
And the sewer line's right there on the north side of the freeway. And that was actually put in back in 87. 87. I put it in. So yeah, whenever we get development interest, we're that much closer to getting water and sewer on the other side. And it has a place for storm drain to go. And we are putting a fiber optic conduit with that, so we can take fiber to the other side of the road as we continue on with our utopia.
Good idea.
Council, questions?
No, I'll make the motion that we award the water line extension project to Rups. Or Grovers. Grovers.
Okay, we have our.
Blaine would like to.
Yeah.
A motion
I'll
by
second
Brett,
that. I'll second that.
second by Lyle H. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Discussion and consideration of authorizing the submission of a certified local government grant application for a historic preservation project that proposes the engagement of consultants to perform the work necessary to submit to the Utah Division of State History and National Park Services a historic district nomination with the boundaries of the district being approximately 300 south to 600 north and from 400 west to 300 east. Sean?
Can you pull up a presentation in your? I thought I'd just take a moment. I'll try to move through it fairly quickly, but I thought it'd be important for you to understand what's specifically being proposed. You might recall back, I think it's been 3 years ago, the city worked with a student from the University of Utah who was doing her master's degree in historic preservation. She came out and she did what was called a constant level survey. And essentially what she did is she went to and evaluated each building within a defined geographic area based on what we felt had a concentration of historically significant buildings, to evaluate them to see if there was essentially enough of a concentrated group of buildings to create a historic district. So if you would go to the next slide, that's just you might recall that was the cover page of that. Go to the next slide if you would. I mentioned just essentially what the purpose was. That was the geographic area which she did the survey, where she looked at each house and looked at such things as the current shape of the house as far as its architectural integrity, the time frame it was built, to make a determination on if there was a high enough concentration of these buildings to create a historic district. So if you would go to the next slide. So she looked at essentially 4 different periods, and what's neat about architecture, from my perspective, is you can start to see different time periods and the different buildings that associate with those time periods, and they all tell a story about Tremonton City. So she looked at 4 contextual periods, which included the homesteading period. You can see on the slide in the years, the community improvement, the growth, the automobiles from 1906 to 1934, post-World War II, and then 1960s to present. So, but the historical significance, they look back 50 years. In order for it to have any historical significance, it's at least 50 years in the past. So if we go to the next. So essentially, part of this reconnaissance level survey, she has to make the determination for each building if it's eligible to be considered as historic, if it's eligible significant, eligible contributing, non-contributing, or out of period. And her analysis showed, her survey, if you would to the next slide, that essentially out of the 208 buildings that were in that geographic area, 109 were contributing, 15 of those were eligible significant, and 94 were eligible contributing. So if you would go to the next slide. You can see in the black dots, I think the black dots represent contributing, and essentially that's the 52% that was included in her findings. So if you would to the next. She also kind of recommended that we do a further analysis to take a look at other parts of the city and see how they stacked up. But the next slide will show you, well, let me tell you really quick what the whole benefit of a historic district is, which is really probably the most interesting slide to you, is essentially if we create a historic district and get it approved by the state and the National Park Service, those buildings that are identified as eligible significant and eligible contributing are available to receive tax credit. So anytime anyone spends over $10,000 and own one of those buildings, they essentially have the ability to get 20% back on their improvements. And it's even spread over a 3-year period of time. So for example, if a homeowner replaced his roof and it was at $10,000, he could essentially submit an application and get tax credit and essentially get returned back $2,000 worth of credit on his taxes. Also, it essentially allows for additional grants to be eligible. For example, in our boundaries that we're proposing, the libraries on there, the museums on there, there's maybe some other buildings that are significant. The church, for example, would be there. And so it would allow future certified local grants to be eligible to be applied to those buildings. And then just the whole concept of community pride and placemaking, as I mentioned. These buildings tell a story about the development of the city and these different periods of time. And I think there's a lot of community pride and placemaking that's attributed to some of the buildings that we have in some of the areas. So if you would, to the next slide. Please keep in mind that this is different. These federally recognized historic districts are different than local historic districts, and they actually have less restrictions. It's a little counterintuitive because usually when you think of the federal government, you think that there's a lot of restrictions that go with it. It's really just the opposite. This is a voluntary process. If we did a local district, a historic district, it would essentially be zoning ordinances that would be applied, and it's a totally different process that is associated with creating a local district governed by the state code. This district, if we did create it, it would go to the state for their review. They actually send out a letter to all the buildings and property owners within that district and allow them a chance to make a comment. Their findings have been is that whenever they do send those out, they've never had a district turned down because of it. In fact, when people realize the benefits of it, and without the restrictions that they conceive could be connected with it, they're actually, see the benefit and the value of doing it. So, for example, Escalante, with the Escalante National Monument, they even have a federally designated historic district. And you would think they would have maybe some difficult feelings against the federal government. That just goes to show you that this isn't a restrictive district. It's essentially the opposite. It's an enhancement of property, or has the potential to enhance property. And that's what we want. We want people to invest in their properties within this district. So the grant itself, you might recall, so the city certified as a certified local government, which means that we're eligible for preservation grants. And talking to the state, they suggested that this is a foundational project that we do because it essentially sets up a geographical area that allows for people to want to invest and improve their properties. It also allows us to do those brick and mortar grants in the future if that's what you decide to do. So essentially, I did get a quote, and it ranged from about $13,000 to about $16,000 to establish it. So the Certified Local Government Grant Program would pay for half of that. An additional amount could be counted towards staff time in establishing the district or doing the work to help establish the district. So at the very worst case scenario, it's about $8,000 that the city could budget, but I expect it to be less than that with city staff's hours participating as in-kind contribution towards our ultimate requirement of the one-to-one match. So if you would, So this is what we're proposing as the area. It included a lot of what had already been surveyed. So that last slide kind of showed you some of the steps that are being proposed in our application, but essentially includes revisiting and just making sure that nothing has changed since the last survey, and then encompassing more territory. We did a windshield survey, looked at homes essentially from the libraries on 2nd East, 2nd North, 3rd North?
Third door.
3rd North up to 6th North. Essentially, those are there's a large amount of homes, and if you're familiar enough with that area, you know that they're mostly post-World War II homes, or maybe they're in the 40s. But at any rate, there's a great mix of homes in there that we believe are eligible, and they would contribute to creating a historic district. And those are the homes, and any home in the district would be eligible for that tax credit. So if you would, let's go to the next slide. So this was just the difference to kind of compare and contrast. I mentioned to you the federal district is all about voluntary compliance with design and guidelines, and there's a process that includes the property owners. As I mentioned, the state sent out a notice and allows property owners to comment. I think we would anticipate holding an open house as well, allowing property owners to come in and have their questions answered. Local district, there's mandatory compliance through zoning, and there's a state code process that we would need to follow in order to establish it. So if you would, I was just going to show you real quick how easy the grant application is. I participated in the grant application. I got money back for some home improvements that I did. And these were all interior improvements. If you would, let's just go to the next slide real quick. I just worked on a bedroom, include paint, carpet, some finished trim. So I just had to essentially write a small little paragraph about what the project was, along with sending before and after pictures. I have to keep track of my own receipts to document it. But essentially what they do is, you can go to the next slide. These are just, again, some interior carpentry. Keep going. I did reworked a closet into a media cabinet. And again, you might not think that would qualify, but it did, as long as you. And I found them to be very flexible on the materials. Even I used some MDF board, so they're more focused on scale and how it overall looks. You can go to the next slide. Keep going. But the point I wanted to let you know is that it is a relatively easy process to participate in the grant, and so the Historic Preservation Commission met maybe a week ago, and essentially reviewed it and is making a recommendation that this be the project. And since they're advisory to the City Council, I wanted to bring this forward to you. We did budget to apply for the grant and our portion of the match, and with that, I just would answer any questions that you
Oh, there's some minuses to it, to the grant. There's nothing
to the grant or to
No.
the historic district?
to the historic district, because there are minuses to it.
Trying to think of any, and
Okay,
honestly,
if a person got tired of their old house and wanted to tear it down, can they tear it down?
yeah,
There's
I
no-
can tear. Mine's on the National Historic Register, which essentially this is the same thing that we would doing, but instead of individual buildings, the whole district would be recognized as being on the National Register. That doesn't preclude a property owner from tearing it down or making improvements. Like if I wanted to put vinyl windows, or anyone wanted to do something that was a little out of character, they could certainly do it. They just wouldn't be eligible for the grant. And they have a state architect that you can visit with and talk to, and they review the application. But like I said, I found them to be very flexible on materials. They're interested in scale, of what the project looks like for once completed.
Council, questions for Sean?
As long as it's voluntary and it doesn't limit somebody as to what they want to do with their own property, I don't have a problem with it. But if it has any limitations, it's scary.
Yeah. There's also commercial tax credit for commercial buildings that are eligible, are eligible contributing. It's a little harder in order to qualify because it's a federal tax credit, but there is that possibility. They have a formula, but again, there is potential there.
So rentals and things like that, if a person is a landlord, they can, if it qualifies.
If it's if it is a rental and it's eligible contributing, my understanding is as long as it's residential, you can apply for the residential.
I think it's a good thing, and hopefully something that will incentivize people to fix up some of these, some of the properties that are in that area. And it's a good thing. I agree with Lyle. I think as long as it's voluntary and we're not telling somebody what they can do or can't do with the property, then.
It wouldn't take long for the citizens within that area to make up that $8,000
Not very long
in
at all.
tax breaks.
I'm just thinking, 3 or 4 years, we could qualify for the Tremont City building.
We were just saying, most of us on this bench would probably qualify.
All of us would.
All of us on the bench would probably qualify.
Oh.
50 years.
We all accept historic site.
You are.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we, how do we say this? That we authorize the submission of the certified local government grant application for the historical preservation in this area we've just been talking about.
Second.
Motion made by Lyle, seconded by Jeffrey. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Okay. Discussion and consideration of disposing of 2 pool tables at the fire department, a Suzuki 125 3-wheeler, a Yamaha Grizzly 600 4-wheeler, and a Zone electric golf cart from the Parks Department. Sean?
Yeah, so according to our ordinance, as we dispose of personal property that has a value over $5,000, and the day we bought it, and I think has a residual value of $250, we bring to the council and have them essentially declare it surplus. And these are items that could be within that threshold, and for that reason we're bringing it forward for your formal designation as surplus property. These are pieces of property that the city owns that have either realized their life, and that's the case with